The Power of Not Reacting: How to Control Your Emotions. You're lying in bed at 2 a.m. replaying the conversation. The one from 6 hours ago that's still burning in your chest. The one where you said things you didn't mean because you were hurt. The one where your voice went high and shaky and you hated yourself for losing control. Again, you knew what was happening while it was happening. You could feel yourself escalating. You watched yourself from outside your body, thinking, "Stop, just stop," while words kept pouring out that you knew you'd regret. And now you're here, awake, anxious, replaying every moment, composing the apology you'll have to send tomorrow, wondering why you can't just keep your shit together like a normal person. This is the third time this month. The pattern is so familiar, it has a script. Something triggers you. Your emotions flood. You react. The situation gets worse. You apologize. You promise yourself it won't happen again. And then it does. You're not broken. You're not too emotional. You're not fundamentally flawed. You just haven't learned the one skill that would change everything. The skill nobody taught you. There's a woman in your life who doesn't do this. You know who I'm talking about. The one who stays calm when everyone else is losing it, who handles the same difficult people and impossible situations you face but somehow doesn't fall apart, who seems to have an off switch for emotional chaos that you're missing. You've probably told yourself she's just naturally calm, or that she doesn't feel things as deeply as you do, or that she's cold, detached, doesn't care as much. None of that is true. She feels everything you feel: the anger, the hurt, the frustration, the fear. The difference is what happens in the 3 seconds between feeling it and reacting to it. You collapse those 3 seconds into one. Feeling and reacting happen simultaneously. There's no gap, no space, no choice. She's learned to expand those 3 seconds into a pause. And in that pause, she shifts from being controlled by her emotions to controlling what she does with them. That's it. That's the whole difference. Not temperament, not genetics, not years of therapy. A 3-second pause. MIT neuroscience research shows that a brief pause changes brain activity from the amygdala, your emotional alarm system that screams, "React now," to the prefrontal cortex, where strategic thinking happens. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about creating the smallest gap between stimulus and response. And in that gap, you get your power back. The cost you're paying that fight with your partner that started over nothing and ended with both of you saying things you can't take back. The friendship that's hanging by a thread because you reacted to one comment like it was a personal attack. The relationship with your mother that's permanently damaged because you exploded instead of pausing. The respect you've lost from others and from yourself because people have learned that when you're upset, they need to manage your emotions instead of trusting you to manage them. The opportunities you've missed because people don't want to work with someone who might blow up. The version of yourself you can't access because you're always in damage control from the last reaction. This isn't about being perfect. This is about the cumulative cost of a pattern you've never interrupted. Stanford research. Women who pause before responding in emotional situations are perceived as 47% more competent and trustworthy, even when they ultimately express the same feelings. The pause doesn't make you weak. It makes you powerful. Your reactions aren't random. Here's what you need to understand. You're not randomly losing control. There's a pattern, and once you see it, you can interrupt it. Something happens. It hits a wound you didn't know you still had. Your nervous system floods with emotion. Your body goes into fight or flight. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that thinks strategically, goes offline, and you react. Not because you're weak. because you're human with a nervous system that's trying to protect you using the only tools it has. The problem is those tools, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, worked when you were 6. They don't work at 36. At 6, screaming when you felt scared made adults come help you. At 36, screaming when you feel scared makes people avoid you. Your nervous system doesn't know this. It's still running childhood programming in adult situations, and that's costing you everything. Yale research, hunger, fatigue, and stress lower your emotional threshold by 60%. You're not weak for reacting, you're depleted. Princeton. People who pause 3 seconds before making emotional decisions make choices that are 34% more aligned with what they actually want long term. You're not broken. Your system just needs new programming. The woman you're becoming. She's not the woman who never feels. She's the woman who feels everything and responds to nothing she doesn't choose to respond to. When someone says something hurtful, she feels the hurt, but she pauses before letting that hurt dictate her response. When she's angry, she feels the full force of that anger, but she channels it strategically instead of exploding it everywhere. When she's scared, she acknowledges the fear, but she doesn't let it drive her decisions. She's not detached. She's deliberate. She's not cold. She's in control. She's not unaffected. She's unshaken. People respect her because she doesn't need them to manage her emotions. She doesn't put her nervous system in their hands. She doesn't make her internal chaos their problem. And the most important part, she respects herself, because she's learned to trust herself in the moments that used to break her. What changes when you master this? The 2 a.m. anxiety sessions, gone, because you're not lying there replaying reactions you regret. You responded instead of reacted. The apology tours, gone, because you didn't say things in anger you have to walk back later. The damaged relationships, healing, because people learn they can have hard conversations with you without you falling apart. The self-respect that's been eroding, rebuilding, because you're keeping promises to yourself about how you'll show up. The version of yourself you've been trying to access, emerging, because you're no longer spending all your energy cleaning up emotional messes you created. Columbia University research, people who focus only on what they can control, their responses, not other people's behavior, experience 58% less anxiety. The pause gives you back control, not over what happens to you, over how you respond to what happens to you. That's the only control that actually matters. What this isn't, let me be absolutely clear about what we're not doing here. This is not about suppressing your emotions. That's toxic and doesn't work. This is not about pretending you don't feel things. That's denial, and it always backfires. This is not about becoming someone who never gets upset. That's not human. This is about creating space between feeling and acting. This is about honoring your emotions as information while refusing to let them control your behavior. This is about being powerful enough to feel everything without being destroyed by any of it. The woman you're becoming will feel even more than you do now, because when you're not afraid of your emotions, you can let yourself feel them fully. She just won't be controlled by them anymore. What you're about to learn: how to recognize the split second before you react, the moment where you still have choice, how to create a circuit breaker that interrupts the automatic reaction pattern even when every cell in your body is screaming at you to explode, how to identify your specific triggers so you can prepare for them instead of being ambushed by them, how to stay grounded when your nervous system is in full panic mode and everything feels like an emergency, how to use silence strategically instead of filling every uncomfortable gap with words you'll regret, how to distinguish between what deserves your emotional energy and what needs to be released, how to build emotional resilience that compounds, where each time you don't react, the next time gets easier, how to become the woman who doesn't react. Not because she doesn't feel, because she's learned to feel everything without letting any of it control her. The promise. Right now, you're controlled by your reactions. You know this because of the relationships that are damaged, the apologies you're always making, the version of yourself you can't access because you're always cleaning up messes from the last time you lost control. But here's what happens when you master the pause. You stop being at the mercy of your emotions. You feel them fully and respond strategically. You stop damaging relationships every time you're upset. You can have hard conversations without destroying what you've built. You stop losing respect from others and yourself. People learn they can trust you, even when things are difficult. You stop living in constant anxiety about the next time you'll lose it, because you're building a system that prevents the loss. You stop being exhausted from emotional chaos, because you're no longer creating the chaos you then have to manage. Northwestern University. People who practice daily emotional awareness reduce their reactivity by 40% within 8 weeks. This isn't theory. This is measurable change. And it starts with understanding one truth. The 3 seconds between what happens and how you respond is where your entire life lives. The next 90 minutes. You're about to learn the exact framework that separates women who stay trapped in emotional reactivity from women who break free from it. Not because you'll become less emotional, because you'll become strategically emotional, not because you'll stop feeling, because you'll start choosing what you do with what you feel, not because you'll change who you are, because you'll finally access the version of yourself that's been buried under years of reactions you couldn't control. It's 2 a.m. You're replaying the conversation. Again, this is the last time. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why you react and why it's destroying you. Let's start with what you already know but haven't named yet. You're not randomly losing control. There's a pattern, and it's been running your life without your permission. Something happens, not always big. Sometimes it's small, a tone, a look, a comment that hits wrong. Your chest tightens, your heart rate spikes, heat floods through you, and before you can think, you're reacting. Defending, explaining, attacking, withdrawing, whatever your particular flavor of reaction is, it's automatic, fast, and almost always something you regret later. This isn't a character flaw. This is conditioning. The reactive trap you've been trained for this your entire life. From the time you were small, you learned that your value came from being responsive, accommodating, immediately available to others' needs and emotions. When someone was upset, you learned to fix it. When someone was uncomfortable, you learned to adjust. When someone needed something, you learned to provide it. Fast. Harvard research shows that women receive 40% more feedback about being flexible and responsive compared to men who get feedback about being strategic and decisive. You've been trained to react quickly, to read the room and adjust immediately, to manage everyone's emotional comfort at the expense of your own. And that training is bleeding into every area of your life, including the moments where immediate reaction serves no one and costs you everything. Think about the last time you reacted in a way you regret. What happened right before? Someone said something that felt like criticism or disrespect or dismissal. Something that hit a nerve you didn't know was exposed. Your body responded first. before your brain could evaluate whether this was actually a threat or just uncomfortable, before you could assess whether this deserved your energy, before you could choose a response that aligned with who you want to be. Your nervous system took over, and you reacted. Not because you're weak, because you're human, with a nervous system designed to keep you safe, using tools that worked when you were 6 but destroy you at 36. Your brain on reaction. Here's what's actually happening in your brain when you react. Something triggers you. Your amygdala, the emotional alarm system in your brain, detects a threat, not a physical threat, an emotional one, rejection, disrespect, criticism, loss of control. Your amygdala doesn't distinguish between actual danger and emotional discomfort. It just knows, this feels bad. Respond now. So it floods your system with stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, your heart rate increases, your breathing shallows, your muscles tense, you're in fight or flight mode. And here's the critical part. When your amygdala takes over, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that thinks strategically, considers consequences, makes wise choices, goes offline. You're literally not thinking clearly. You can't. The part of your brain that would normally evaluate the situation and choose a strategic response is unavailable. So you react from your most primitive survival instincts. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. You attack the person who triggered you, or you run from the conversation, or you shut down completely, or you immediately try to please your way out of the discomfort. None of these responses are strategic. None of them serve your long-term interests. None of them are who you actually want to be. But in that moment, they're all you have access to. Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, Harvard neuroscientist, found that the physiological lifespan of an emotion is 90 seconds. 90 seconds from trigger to peak to natural dissipation. But here's what extends it. If you react to the emotion, if you feed it with thoughts, words, or actions, you restart the 90-second cycle. You can keep an emotion alive for hours, days, weeks by continuously reacting to it. That fight you keep having, it's not one fight. It's you reacting to your reaction in an endless loop that neither of you can escape. The emotion itself would pass in 90 seconds. But you're keeping it alive. Why intelligent women react more. Here's the part nobody talks about. The smarter you are, the more you're at risk for destructive reactions. Because you overthink, you see patterns, you connect dots, you project into the future, you analyze every possible meaning behind what just happened. Someone makes a comment. A less analytical person might take it at face value and move on, but your brain immediately generates 17 possible interpretations. What did they really mean? Why did they say it that way? What does this say about what they think of me? Where is this heading? And while your brain is spinning through all these interpretations, your nervous system is treating each one as if it's real. So you're not just responding to what actually happened. You're responding to 17 hypothetical scenarios your brain invented. Add in people-pleasing tendencies, the need to be liked, to avoid conflict, to keep everyone comfortable, and you get a dangerous combination. You're hypervigilant to any sign of disapproval. You're constantly monitoring for threats to connection. You're reading into everything because maintaining relationships feels like survival. So small things become big things. A neutral comment becomes evidence of rejection. A moment of distance becomes abandonment. A disagreement becomes a fundamental threat to the relationship. And you react accordingly, not to what's actually happening, to the catastrophic story your brain told you about what's happening, the real cost. Let's be honest about what this is costing you. Damaged relationships. The people you love have learned to walk on eggshells around you, not because you're a bad person, because they never know what will trigger a reaction. So they hide things. They avoid certain topics. They manage you instead of trusting you. Lost opportunities. That promotion you didn't get because people remember the time you got defensive in a meeting. The collaboration that never happened because someone saw you react poorly to feedback once. The respect you could have earned, but didn't, because people have decided you're too emotional. Eroded credibility. Every time you react, you reinforce a narrative that you can't be trusted with difficult information, that you need to be protected from hard truths, that you're not capable of handling challenges without falling apart. Internal chaos. The exhaustion of living in constant emotional reactivity, the anxiety of never knowing when the next trigger will hit, the shame spiral after every reaction, the promises to yourself that you'll do better next time, promises you break again and again. And here's the worst part. The damage to your relationship with yourself. Every time you react in a way you regret, you lose a little more trust in yourself. You start to believe the narrative that you're too much, that you can't control yourself, that you're fundamentally broken. You're not broken. You're just running on outdated programming. Stanford research found that women who pause before responding in emotional situations are perceived as 47% more competent and trustworthy than women who react immediately, even when they ultimately express the same feelings. The content isn't the problem, the delivery is, and the delivery is controlled by whether you react or respond. The pattern you keep repeating. You know this pattern intimately. Something triggers you. Your emotions flood. You react, whether that's exploding, withdrawing, defending, or people-pleasing. The situation gets worse. You deal with the aftermath. You apologize. You promise yourself it won't happen again. And then it does, because you're trying to solve the wrong problem. You're trying to control your emotions, to feel less, to be less sensitive, to toughen up. But the problem isn't that you feel too much. The problem is that you haven't learned to create space between feeling and acting. You're trying to suppress the emotion. What you need to learn is how to pause before expressing it. You're treating the reaction as inevitable. What you need to understand is that the reaction is a choice, even though it doesn't feel like one right now. Every time you react without pausing, you reinforce the neural pathway that makes reaction automatic. You're literally training your brain that feeling steers immediate action. But every time you pause, even for 3 seconds, you start building a new pathway. One that says, feeling sees information that requires evaluation before action. Princeton research shows that people who pause for just 3 seconds before responding under pressure make decisions that are 34% more aligned with their long-term goals. 3 seconds. That's the difference between destruction and strategy. What they don't tell you. Here's what nobody told you, but you need to hear. Reactions feel natural because they are natural. They're your nervous system's first draft response to perceived threat. But natural doesn't mean optimal. Natural doesn't mean strategic. Natural doesn't mean aligned with who you want to be. The woman who seems naturally calm, she's not. She's trained the pause. She's built the gap between stimulus and response. She's rewired her nervous system through practice. You can do the same. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about accessing the version of yourself that exists on the other side of the reaction. The version who feels everything you feel, but chooses what she does with it. Who honors her emotions as information, but refuses to let them dictate her behavior. Who's powerful enough to sit with discomfort without immediately discharging it onto everyone around her? That version of you already exists. She's just buried under years of automatic reactions you never learned to interrupt. The cost of continuing. If you keep reacting the way you're reacting, here's what your future looks like. More damaged relationships, more apologies you have to make, more trust you have to rebuild, more people who love you but can't fully trust you with hard things, more lost opportunities, more rooms you're not invited into because people have decided you can't handle pressure, more respect that goes to someone else who seems more stable, more internal chaos, more 2 a.m. anxiety spirals, more shame about who you were in that moment, more promises to yourself that you'll break again. More distance from the woman you're capable of being. This is the trajectory you're on if nothing changes. But here's the truth. Change is possible. Not because you'll become less emotional, because you'll become strategically emotional. You'll feel everything you feel now, maybe even more deeply because you won't be afraid of your own emotions anymore, but you won't be controlled by them. You'll learn to pause, to create space, to respond instead of react. And in that space between stimulus and response, you'll find the power you've been looking for. The bottom line. You're not too emotional. You're not broken. You're not fundamentally flawed. You just haven't learned the skill that would change everything. The ability to pause between feeling and acting. Your reactions are expensive. They're costing you relationships, opportunities, credibility, and peace of mind. But they're not inevitable. They're a habit. And habits can be interrupted, rewired, and replaced. The woman who doesn't react isn't superhuman. She's not unfeeling. She's not operating from some elevated plane of existence you can't access. She's just learned what you're about to learn. How to create 3 seconds of space between what happens and how she responds. 3 seconds where her brain shifts from reactive mode to strategic mode. Where she moves from being controlled by her emotions to choosing what she does with them. 3 seconds that change everything. You're about to learn exactly how to build those 3 seconds into your nervous system, not as theory, as practice, not as aspiration, as skill, starting now. Chapter 2. The pause that changes everything. The moment between what happens and how you respond is where your entire life lives. Right now, that moment doesn't exist for you. Something triggers you and you react. There's no gap, no space, no choice. Stimulus and response are fused together into one automatic action. But what if they weren't? What if you could create even the smallest separation between feeling something and doing something about it? That separation, that pause, is the most powerful tool you'll ever learn. Not because it makes you less emotional, because it gives you back control over what you do with your emotions. The 3-second power move 3 seconds. That's all you need. Not 3 minutes of meditation, not 3 hours of therapy. 3 seconds of pause between stimulus and response. In those 3 seconds, something extraordinary happens in your brain. When you're triggered, your amygdala, your emotional alarm system, hijacks your nervous system. It floods you with stress hormones. It shuts down your prefrontal cortex. It pushes you into pure reaction mode. But if you can pause for just 3 seconds, you interrupt that hijacking process. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that thinks strategically, considers consequences, makes wise choices, comes back online. You shift from reactive mode to reflective mode, from being controlled by the emotion to having access to choice about what you do with it. This isn't about suppressing the emotion. The feeling is still there. You're just creating space around it so you can decide how to respond instead of being forced into automatic reaction. MIT neuroscience research shows that even a brief pause changes measurable brain activity from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, from emotional reactivity to strategic thinking. 3 seconds creates that shift. This is the difference between the woman who's always apologizing for her reactions and the woman who rarely has to apologize at all. Not because one feels less, because one has learned to pause. The military knows this. The U.S. military trains soldiers in tactical breathing for exactly this reason. When you're in combat and adrenaline floods your system, you can't think clearly. You're in pure survival mode. And in that state, you make catastrophic mistakes. So they teach a simple technique, box breathing, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. 1 round of box breathing, 16 seconds total, is enough to shift brain activity from panic to tactical thinking. If it works when someone's shooting at you, it works when someone's criticizing you in a meeting. The physiology is the same. Perceived threat, adrenaline spike, amygdala hijack. The pause interrupts it. You don't need box breathing specifically. You just need something, anything that creates a brief interruption between stimulus and response. Some women count backwards from 5. Some press their thumb and forefinger together. Some take 1 deep breath and feel their feet on the ground. The specific technique doesn't matter. What matters is that it breaks the automatic reaction loop and gives your strategic brain time to engage. Princeton research found that people who pause for just 3 seconds before making decisions under pressure make choices that are 34% more aligned with their long-term goals. 34% better decisions from 3 seconds of pause. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between the life you're living and the life you want. Identify your triggers. You can't pause if you don't know when you need to. Most women are blindsided by their triggers. Something hits and they're already reacting before they realize what happened. But your triggers aren't random. They're specific and predictable. You need to know what they are. Sit down right now and write them out. What situations, words, tones, behaviors consistently make you react without thinking? Is it criticism, being interrupted, feeling ignored? Being told you're wrong, seeing someone you love in pain, feeling controlled, time pressure, uncertainty, perceived disrespect? Get specific. Not just when someone's rude. What specifically feels like rudeness to you? A certain tone, being dismissed, eye rolling, someone checking their phone while you're talking. The more specific you are, the better you can prepare. Because here's the truth, you can't eliminate triggers. Life will keep presenting situations that hit your sensitive spots, but you can learn to recognize them before they fully activate. And in that split second of recognition, you can deploy your pause. Most people try to avoid their triggers. They manage their environment so they never have to face difficult emotions. But that's not power, that's avoidance. And it makes you smaller and smaller as the list of things you can't handle grows longer. Real power is knowing your triggers intimately and training yourself to pause when they hit, not so you don't feel them, so you don't react to them automatically. Your triggers are information, not weakness. They're showing you where you still have wounds that need attention, where your nervous system learned to perceive threat, where you need to build new response patterns, pay attention to them, learn from them, but don't let them control you. Create your circuit breaker. You need a physical pattern that interrupts the automatic reaction, not a mental strategy, a physical one. because when you're triggered, you can't think your way out. Your thinking brain is offline. You need something your body can do automatically that breaks the reaction loop. Here's how to build it. First, choose your circuit breaker, something simple, something you can do in any situation without drawing attention. Options: 3 deep breaths, counting each one. Press your thumb and forefinger together while counting to 3. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice the contact. Count backwards from 5 slowly. Place your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat. Pick 1. Practice it when you're calm until it becomes automatic. Then, the next time you feel that surge, that spike of emotion that usually precedes a reaction, deploy your circuit breaker immediately. Don't evaluate whether you need it. Don't debate whether the trigger is worth pausing for. Just do it. Trigger hits, circuit breaker activates. 3 seconds of pause, strategic response becomes possible. This is training. You're building a new neural pathway. Stimulus no longer leads directly to reaction. It leads to pause, which leads to choice, which leads to response. The first few times, it will feel awkward. You'll forget to do it. You'll remember halfway through your reaction and realize you missed the window. That's normal. You're interrupting a pattern that's been running automatically for years. But every time you remember, every time you catch yourself and pause, even if you've already started reacting, you strengthen the new pathway. And eventually, the pause becomes automatic. You won't have to remember to do it. Your nervous system will do it for you. Yale research shows that consistent practice of a physical interrupt pattern reduces automatic reactivity by 40% within 8 weeks. 8 weeks. That's how long it takes to rewire your nervous system if you practice consistently. You've been reacting automatically for years. 8 weeks to change that pattern is nothing. The strategic question. Once you've paused, you need to know what to do with that pause. Most people pause and then just react anyway. They create the space but don't know how to use it. Here's what you do. Ask one question. What outcome do I want? Not what do I want to say? Not how do I want to feel? What result am I trying to create? This question reorients everything, because suddenly you're not discharging emotion. You're pursuing a goal. Someone criticizes you in a meeting. Your automatic reaction is to defend yourself, but you pause. 3 seconds. Then you ask, what outcome do I want? Do I want to win this argument, or do I want to influence the decision? Do I want to prove them wrong, or do I want to be taken seriously going forward? Do I want to vent my frustration, or do I want to strengthen my professional reputation? The outcome you want determines the response you choose. If you want to influence the decision, defensiveness doesn't serve you, but a calm, strategic response to their concern does. If you want to be taken seriously going forward, emotional reactivity undermines you. But thoughtful engagement with their critique builds credibility. Your partner says something that hurts. Your automatic reaction is to hurt them back or withdraw completely. But you pause. What outcome do I want? Do I want revenge? Or do I want to repair this? Do I want to punish them? Or do I want to be understood? Do I want to win? Or do I want the relationship to survive this? The outcome determines the response. This isn't about suppressing your legitimate feelings. It's about channeling them toward what you actually want instead of letting them destroy what matters to you. You can still express that you're hurt, but you can express it in a way that invites connection instead of escalating conflict. You can still set a boundary, but you can set it from strategy instead of rage. The emotion is valid. The automatic reaction to the emotion is usually not. When not to pause. There are times when immediate reaction is appropriate, actual emergencies. If someone's in danger, you don't pause to strategize, you act. When immediate boundary setting is required, if someone crosses a hard line, physical safety, verbal abuse, profound disrespect, sometimes the most strategic response is an immediate, clear reaction that establishes the boundary cannot be crossed. When silence would be interpreted as agreement, in some situations, pausing looks like acceptance. If someone's saying something harmful about another person and you say nothing, your silence can be read as endorsement. Sometimes immediate pushback is necessary. But here's what to notice. These situations are rare. Most of what triggers you is not an emergency. Most of what upsets you doesn't require immediate action. Most of what bothers you would benefit from a pause. The problem is your nervous system treats everything like an emergency. Someone criticizes your idea, not an emergency. Your partner forgets to do something they said they'd do, not an emergency. A friend makes a comment that feels like judgment, not an emergency. But your body responds as if it is. Heart racing, adrenaline spiking, fight or flight activated, and you react accordingly. The pause helps you distinguish between actual emergencies and uncomfortable moments that feel like emergencies. Real emergencies are rare. Everything else deserves a pause. The difference between pause and avoidance. Some women hear pause and think it means never address hard things. That's not what this is. A pause is not avoidance. It's preparation. Avoidance is, I'm uncomfortable with this conversation, so I'm never going to have it. Pause is, I'm uncomfortable with this conversation, so I'm going to create space to approach it strategically instead of reactively. Avoidance makes you smaller. It limits your life to only what feels comfortable. Pause makes you more powerful. It means you can face difficult things without being destroyed by them. Avoidance is driven by fear. Pause is driven by wisdom. You're not pausing because you can't handle the situation. You're pausing because you want to handle it well. There's a massive difference. Some situations require multiple pauses. You feel triggered. You pause. You respond. You feel triggered again by their response. You pause again. This isn't weakness. This is mastery. You're training yourself to stay present in difficult situations without either exploding or collapsing. That's power. The practice. Start small. Don't wait for the biggest trigger of your life to practice pausing. You'll fail. The stakes will be too high and the pattern too entrenched. Start with minor irritations, traffic, long lines, small disappointments, moments where the stakes are low, but the emotional reaction is real. Practice pausing there. Feel the irritation. Notice the urge to react, to honk, to sigh dramatically, to complain. Then pause. 3 seconds. Deploy your circuit breaker. Ask, what outcome do I want? The outcome here is probably just to stay calm and not ruin your own mood over something that doesn't matter. So you choose that. You let the irritation be there without feeding it with reaction. This builds the muscle. Then you graduate to medium triggers, annoying comments, mild criticism, small conflicts, pause, circuit breaker, strategic question, response. You're building the neural pathway that makes pause automatic. By the time a major trigger hits, the pattern is strong enough to activate even under high pressure. But you have to practice. You can't just read about pausing and expect it to work when you need it most. You build the skill in low-stakes moments so it's available in high-stakes ones. Northwestern University research shows that people who practice daily pause techniques, even just 1 minute of intentional breathing or grounding, reduce their overall reactivity by 40% within 2 months. Daily practice, 2 months, 40% reduction in automatic reactions. That's measurable, significant change. The bottom line. The pause is not passive. It's the most powerful move you can make. It's the space between stimulus and response where your freedom lives. It's the 3 seconds that determine whether you react from your most primitive survival instincts or respond from your wisest, most strategic self. It's the difference between being controlled by your emotions and channeling them toward what you actually want. You don't need hours of meditation. You don't need years of therapy. You don't need to become someone else. You need 3 seconds and the willingness to practice creating them. Trigger, circuit breaker, pause, strategic question, response. That's the sequence, and it changes everything. Chapter 3. Understand your emotional patterns. You're not too emotional. Let's start there. Because that's the lie you've been told by others, by society, probably by yourself. You feel too much. You're too sensitive. You overreact. You need to toughen up. Get thicker skin. Stop being so dramatic. All lies. The problem is not that you feel. The problem is that you haven't learned to understand what you're feeling and why. So you react to emotions like they're emergencies, like they're facts, like they require immediate action. But emotions aren't facts, they're information. And when you learn to read that information accurately, everything changes. You're not too emotional. Society gaslights women about emotions constantly. When a man gets angry, he's passionate, driven, a strong leader who cares deeply. When a woman gets angry, she's emotional, unstable, needs to calm down. When a man expresses frustration, he's setting boundaries, being direct, demanding excellence. When a woman expresses frustration, she's difficult, too much, overreacting. The emotion is the same, the interpretation is different, and you've internalized this. You've learned to distrust your own feelings, to second guess whether what you're feeling is valid, to wonder if maybe you are too sensitive, too reactive, too much. You're not. Your emotions are data. They're your internal guidance system telling you when something matters, when a boundary's been crossed, when something doesn't feel right. The problem isn't the emotion, it's what you do with it. Most women swing between 2 extremes, suppression or explosion. You either stuff everything down, pretending you're fine until you can't anymore and you detonate, or you express everything immediately, discharging emotion without filter or strategy. Neither works. Suppression makes you sick, literally. Yale research shows that chronic emotional suppression increases cortisol levels, weakens immune function, and correlates with higher rates of anxiety and depression. But explosion damages everything around you: relationships, reputation, trust. There's a third option: understanding your emotions well enough that you can feel them fully without being controlled by them. That's not suppression. That's emotional intelligence, and it starts with mapping your patterns. Map your triggers. You have patterns, specific, predictable patterns. Certain situations trigger certain emotions, which lead to certain reactions. And until you map these patterns, you're at their mercy. Think about the last 5 times you reacted in a way you regret. What triggered each reaction? Not the surface trigger, someone said something, someone did something. The deeper trigger. What did that touch in you? Most reactions trace back to a handful of core wounds: fear of abandonment, fear of being controlled, fear of being disrespected, fear of inadequacy, fear of being unseen. Something happens in the present, but it activates a wound from the past, and you react to the old wound, not the current situation. Someone forgets to text you back. Surface level, mildly annoying. But if you have an abandonment wound, that forgotten text feels like evidence that you don't matter, that you're not a priority, that you're going to be left. So you don't react to the forgotten text. You react to the terror of abandonment, with anger, with withdrawal, with tests to see if they'll chase you, none of which addresses the actual situation, all of which damages the relationship. Your partner makes a decision without consulting you, surface level, inconsiderate. But if you have a control wound, maybe from growing up with a parent who controlled everything, that decision feels like your autonomy is being taken, like you're being dismissed, like you're powerless. So you don't react to the inconsideration, you react to the terror of losing control, with anger, with accusations, with attempts to assert dominance. Again, not addressing the situation, just reacting to the old wound. The pattern is trigger, wound activation, emotion, reaction. And until you understand which wounds are getting activated, you'll keep reacting to things that happened 20 years ago instead of what's happening now. Columbia University research shows that people who can identify their core emotional patterns make decisions that are 43% more aligned with their actual values instead of their triggered state. Knowing your wounds doesn't make them go away, but it helps you recognize when they're running the show. Break the pattern. Once you know your pattern, you can interrupt it. The moment you feel triggered, ask, what is this really about? Not what they did, what it activated in me. Someone criticizes your work. You feel defensive, angry, like you need to prove yourself. Pause. What is this really about? Maybe it's about your father, who never thought you were good enough. Maybe it's about the teacher who made you feel stupid. Maybe it's about every time you tried and failed and decided you were fundamentally inadequate. That's the wound talking, not the current criticism. And here's the critical part. The wound might have valid historical roots, but it's not giving you accurate information about the present moment. Your father's approval issues don't mean this criticism is unfair. Your teacher's cruelty doesn't mean feedback is an attack. Your past failures don't mean you can't handle critique now. Separate the trigger from your interpretation. They interrupted me is what happened. They don't respect me is your interpretation. Those are not the same thing. Maybe they interrupted because they're excited about the topic. Maybe they have ADHD and struggle with impulse control. Maybe they're rude to everyone, not specifically you. Maybe they do disrespect you. But you don't know which one is true until you separate the event from your story about the event. When you can do that, you get choice. You can address the actual behavior without the emotional charge from the wound. Hey, I wasn't finished. Let me complete my thought is a clean boundary. You never listen to me. You don't respect anything I say. You always do this. Is the wound reacting? Same trigger, completely different response. One addresses the situation, one escalates it. Physical state matters. Here's something most people ignore. Your physical state determines your emotional threshold. You're not having the same reaction on 8 hours of sleep that you're having on 4. You're not responding the same way on a full stomach that you are when you're hungry. You're not reacting the same when you're rested that you are when you're depleted. Yale research found that hunger, fatigue, and stress lower emotional threshold by 60%. 60%. That means the same comment that you could brush off when you're rested will devastate you when you're exhausted. The same situation you could handle when you're fed will trigger a meltdown when you're hungry. This isn't weakness, this is biology. Your nervous system needs resources to regulate emotion. When you're depleted, those resources aren't available, so your regulation fails. And you react. This is why you snap at your partner over something small after a terrible day at work. why you cry over minor frustrations when you're exhausted, why everything feels like a crisis when you're running on empty. Your emotional capacity is directly tied to your physical state. So if you want to stop reacting, you need to take care of your body, not as a luxury, as a necessity. Sleep, real sleep, 7 to 9 hours, not 5 hours in caffeine, food, regular meals, not skipping breakfast and wondering why you're irritable by noon. Movement. Your body needs to discharge stress. If you don't move it, it stores in your nervous system and comes out as reactivity. Rest. Actual downtime. Not scrolling Instagram, not background TV. Silence. Stillness. Space for your nervous system to reset. When you're resourced, your emotional threshold is higher. You can handle more before you react. When you're depleted, everything feels like too much. So stop treating self-care like it's optional. It's the foundation of emotional regulation. Your energy budget. You have a limited amount of emotional energy each day. Every reaction drains that budget. Think of it like money. You have a certain amount to spend. Every time you react, you're making a withdrawal. Small irritation, small reaction, minor withdrawal. Major trigger, big reaction, major withdrawal. The problem is, most women spend their entire emotional budget on things that don't matter. Traffic, annoying coworker, rude cashier, friend who didn't text back, partner who left dishes in the sink. By the time something actually important happens, a real conflict, a significant decision, a moment that deserves your emotional energy, you're bankrupt. You have nothing left. So you either shut down completely or you explode disproportionately. Neither serves you. Strategic non-reaction is about budgeting your emotional energy. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not everything is worth the cost. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You could get angry, honk, yell, let it ruin the next 20 minutes while you rant about it. Or you could let it go. They're already gone. Your anger doesn't affect them. It only depletes you. That's not suppression. That's choosing not to spend emotional energy on something that doesn't deserve it. A coworker makes a passive-aggressive comment. You could engage, defend yourself, get into it. Or you could recognize, this person is miserable and trying to make it my problem. I'm not taking that on. That's not avoidance. That's refusing to accept an emotional burden that isn't yours. Choose your battles based on what's worth the cost. Is this relationship worth the energy to repair? Then engage. Is this principle worth defending? Then stand your ground. Is this person worth your time and emotional investment? Then have the conversation. But the random stranger who's rude, the driver who cut you off, the minor slight from someone who doesn't matter to you, let it go. Save your energy for what actually matters. MIT research shows that people who practice strategic non-engagement with minor triggers report 38% less daily stress and better emotional regulation overall, not because they suppress, because they choose. The difference between feeling and feeding, you're allowed to feel everything: anger, sadness, frustration, fear, disappointment, hurt. All of it is valid. All of it is information. But there's a difference between feeling an emotion and feeding it, feeling it. I'm angry right now. I can feel it in my chest. My heart is racing. I want to yell. Feeding it, replaying what happened, imagining what you should have said, building a case for why you're right and they're wrong, telling the story to 5 different people to get validation. Feeling it lets the emotion pass. Feeding it keeps it alive. Remember the 90-second rule from Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor? An emotion, if you don't feed it, peaks and passes in 90 seconds. But if you feed it with thoughts, stories, and replaying, you can keep that emotion alive for hours, days, weeks. You've done this. You're still angry about something that happened 2 years ago because you keep feeding it, not on purpose. But every time you tell the story, you reactivate the emotion. Every time you replay what they said, you feel it again. You're keeping the wound fresh by poking it constantly. Feel it, acknowledge it, let it move through you, but don't feed it. Know yourself better than your triggers know you. Your triggers know you intimately. They know exactly which buttons to push. They know your wounds, your fears, your sensitivities, and they use that knowledge against you. The only way to stop being controlled by your triggers is to know yourself better than they know you. To understand your patterns so well that when a trigger hits, you can recognize it immediately. Oh, this is my abandonment wound. This is my control wound. This is my inadequacy wound. And in that recognition, you get space. The trigger doesn't own you anymore. You see it for what it is, not a fact about the present, a pattern from the past. And you can choose whether to react from the pattern or respond from the present. That's mastery, not the absence of emotion, the ability to feel everything without being controlled by any of it. The bottom line: you're not too emotional. You're insufficiently aware of your emotional patterns. There's a massive difference. Your emotions are valid. They're information. They matter. But your automatic reactions to those emotions are often destructive. The goal is not to feel less. It's to understand more, to know your triggers, to recognize your wounds, to see your patterns clearly enough that you can interrupt them, to take care of your physical state so your emotional threshold stays high. To budget your emotional energy for what actually matters instead of spending it on everything that bothers you. To feel your emotions without feeding them into prolonged reactivity. When you understand your patterns, you stop being surprised by your reactions. You see them coming. You recognize what's getting activated. You choose whether to engage from the wound or respond from wisdom. That's emotional intelligence, not the absence of feeling, the strategic channeling of feeling. And it's a skill you build through practice, awareness, and commitment to knowing yourself better than your triggers know you. Chapter 4. Stay calm when everything feels urgent. Everything feels urgent when you're in reaction mode. The email that needs a response, the decision that needs to be made, the conversation that needs to happen, the problem that needs to be solved, right now, immediately, before anything else. Except most of it isn't actually urgent. It just feels that way, and that feeling is controlling your life. The urgency addiction. Your brain is wired to prioritize urgency over importance. Urgent things trigger your stress response. They create pressure. They demand attention. They activate your nervous system. So you respond to them immediately, not because they matter most, because they feel most intense. This is why you spend your day putting out fires while the important work, the things that would actually move your life forward, never gets done. You're not lazy. You're not undisciplined. You're addicted to the dopamine hit of urgency. Responding to something urgent feels productive. It feels necessary. It quiets the anxiety temporarily, but it doesn't move you toward what you actually want. The woman who's always in crisis lives here. Everything is urgent. Everything is an emergency. She's constantly stressed, constantly reacting, constantly busy. The woman who never seems rushed. She's learned to distinguish between urgent and important. She knows that most urgent things aren't important, and most important things aren't urgent, and she responds accordingly. Assess before you act when something feels urgent. Pause and ask, is this actually urgent or does it just feel urgent? Actual urgency is rare. Medical emergency, safety threat, time-sensitive opportunity that disappears if you don't act now. Most of what feels urgent is just uncomfortable. Someone's waiting. There's pressure. You're anxious about it. But discomfort isn't emergency. Use the 10-10-10 rule. How will this matter in 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years? If it won't matter in 10 months, it's probably not actually urgent. That email demanding immediate response? In 10 months, you won't remember it existed. That argument you need to have right now? In 10 years, you'll wish you'd paused and approached it strategically. That decision you're being pressured to make immediately, in 10 minutes, the pressure will still be there, but you'll have more clarity if you pause. Most manufactured urgency is someone else's anxiety trying to become your emergency. You don't have to accept that transfer. Stay grounded in chaos. When everything around you is chaotic, you need an anchor, something that grounds you, something that reminds your nervous system, I'm safe, I can handle this, I don't need to panic, this is personal. What grounds you won't ground someone else. For some women, it's nature, stepping outside for 2 minutes, feeling sun or wind or rain. For some, it's movement, a walk around the block, stretching, dancing in your kitchen for one song. For some, it's stillness, sitting in silence, closing your eyes, breathing deliberately. For some, it's music, a specific song that shifts your state immediately. Find what works for you, then use it, not when you have time, when you need it most. Chicago research shows that people who practice regular grounding techniques manage crisis situations 52% better than those who don't. Build your calm before you need it, because when chaos hits, you won't have bandwidth to figure out what helps you. You need to know already. Practice grounding when you're not in crisis, so when crisis comes, the pattern is automatic. Focus on what you control. Here's the truth that will set you free. You can't control the situation. You can only control your response. That sounds like a limitation. It's actually liberation. Because as long as you're trying to control things you can't control, you'll be in constant chaos. Your partner's mood, your boss's opinion, the economy, other people's choices, traffic, weather, outcomes. None of that is yours to control. What you can control, your thoughts, your actions, your responses, your boundaries. That's it. That's the list. And when you focus only on what's actually in your control, everything gets simpler. You can't control whether your partner is having a bad day. You can control whether you take it personally. You can't control whether your boss appreciates your work. You can control the quality of work you deliver. You can't control whether other people like you. You can control whether you like yourself. Accept uncertainty instead of resisting it. You don't know what's going to happen. None of us do. But you can trust that you'll handle whatever comes, because you've been handling things your whole life. That trust in yourself, not in outcomes, is what creates calm. Let the storm pass. Some situations resolve themselves if you don't interfere. This is the hardest lesson for women who've been trained to fix, manage, and smooth everything. But not everything needs your intervention. Not everything benefits from your involvement. Sometimes the most strategic move is to do nothing. Your friend is upset. Your instinct is to fix it, solve it, make it better. But maybe they just need to feel it. Maybe your job isn't to fix. Maybe it's just to be present while they process. Your partner is frustrated. Your instinct is to defend, explain, resolve it immediately. But maybe they need space. Maybe the conversation will be more productive in an hour when you're both calmer. Someone's trying to pull you into drama. Your instinct is to engage, to defend yourself. to set the record straight. But maybe the most powerful response is no response. Maybe engaging just feeds it. Strategic inaction is not avoidance, it's wisdom. It's recognizing that some storms pass faster if you don't stand in the middle of them trying to control the wind. Your calm becomes your competitive advantage when everyone else is reacting. Urgency is a feeling, not a fact. The next time something feels urgent, remind yourself. Urgency is a feeling, not a fact. Your nervous system is giving you information, adrenaline, pressure, the sense that something needs to happen now. But your nervous system doesn't understand modern life. It evolved for physical threats, predators, immediate danger. It treats an uncomfortable email the same way it treats a bear attack. Both trigger the same stress response. Both feel urgent. But one actually is, one isn't. Your job is to override the feeling with assessment. Is this actually urgent? Or does it just feel that way because my nervous system is activated? Most of the time, it's the latter. And when you recognize that, you get your power back. You stop being yanked around by every manufactured emergency. You stop spending your energy on things that don't deserve it. You respond to what's actually important. You let the rest resolve itself or not. And either way, you're not destroyed by it. The practice. For the next week, track everything that feels urgent. Write it down, the thing that felt like it needed immediate attention. Then next to it, write, was this actually urgent? You'll find that most of what felt urgent wasn't. And that awareness alone will start to shift how you respond. Because once you see the pattern, once you realize your brain is labeling everything as urgent when most things aren't, you can start questioning that label in real time. This feels urgent, but is it actually? Or is this just my nervous system being activated? That question creates space, and in that space you can choose calm over chaos. The bottom line: most of life isn't actually urgent. It just feels that way when you're reactive. The woman who stays calm isn't experiencing less pressure. She's just not treating every pressure point like an emergency. She's learned to assess before she acts, to ground herself in chaos, to focus only on what she can control, to let some storms pass without her intervention, and in doing so, she's accessed a level of peace that looked impossible when everything felt urgent. Urgency is a feeling. Important is a fact. Learn to tell the difference and respond accordingly. Chapter 5. Silence is your secret weapon. You've been taught to fill every gap, every uncomfortable pause, every moment of tension, every silence that stretches too long. You fill it with words, with explanations, with nervous laughter, with anything to make the discomfort go away. Because silence feels like failure, like you're not engaging, like you're letting them down or missing your chance. But silence isn't weakness. Silence is power, and it's time you learn to use it. When words make it worse, there are moments when speaking makes everything worse. When you're flooded with emotion and nothing you say will come out right. When the other person needs space to process, and your words are just interference. When you're about to say something you can't take back, and silence is the only thing protecting the relationship. Most women can't tolerate these moments. The discomfort is too much, so they talk, they over-explain, they apologize unnecessarily, they fill the silence with words that dilute their power or damage what they're trying to protect, and then they regret it. Here's what you need to understand. You don't owe anyone immediate words. Not when you're upset. Not when they're demanding an answer. Not when the silence feels unbearable. You're allowed to be quiet while you figure out what you actually want to say. That's not avoidance. That's strategy. the strategic silence. Strategic silence is a deliberate choice to say nothing when speaking would be harmful. It's not passive-aggressive withdrawal. It's not the silent treatment meant to punish. It's the conscious decision to pause, to wait, to let the moment breathe before you respond. When to deploy it: when your emotions are overwhelming and you know anything you say right now will come from the wound, not from wisdom. When you need time to process what just happened before you can respond thoughtfully. When the other person is escalated and anything you say will just fuel the fire. When silence will communicate more powerfully than words. Sometimes saying nothing says everything. This requires practice, because your instinct is to fill the gap, to smooth things over, to manage everyone's discomfort, including your own. But managing discomfort isn't your job. Protecting your peace is. What silence does silence gives you time to think? When you're triggered, your prefrontal cortex goes offline. You can't think clearly. You can't access your wisest self. But if you stay silent for even 60 seconds, your brain starts to calm. Strategic thinking comes back online. Silence forces others to sit with their own discomfort. You're not responsible for managing how other people feel. When you rush to fill silence because they're uncomfortable, you're taking on emotional labor that isn't yours. Let them sit with it. Let them feel whatever they're feeling. It's not your job to fix. Silence creates space for truth to emerge. When you stop talking, filling, explaining, defending, sometimes the truth becomes obvious to you, to them, to the situation itself. Things that were hidden under a pile of words become visible in the quiet. Northwestern University research shows that people who practice daily silence, even just 5 minutes, reduce their overall emotional reactivity by 40% within 8 weeks. Silence isn't emptiness. It's space where clarity grows. Practice silence daily. You can't suddenly deploy silence in high-stakes moments if you never practice it in low-stakes ones. Start building silence into your daily life. Eat one meal without your phone, no podcast, no TV, just you and your food. Take a walk without listening to anything, just the sounds around you and your own thoughts. Sit for 5 minutes in the morning before you check your phone, just breathing, just being. This feels impossible at first. Your brain will resist, you'll feel anxious, you'll want to reach for distraction. That's normal. You've trained yourself to fill every gap with noise. You're undoing that training. But the more you practice intentional silence, the less it feels threatening. You learn that silence isn't dangerous. You learn that you can tolerate discomfort. You learn that quiet doesn't mean something's wrong. And then when you need to be silent in a difficult conversation, you have the capacity to do it because you've practiced. Return to conversation stronger. Silence isn't the end of communication. It's a pause. You're not avoiding the conversation. You're giving yourself time to approach it from strength instead of reaction. When you return to the conversation after silence, everything changes. You're calmer. You've processed the initial emotional flood. You can think clearly. You're more strategic. You know what you actually want to say. Instead of just discharging emotion, you're more powerful because you didn't give them the reactive version of you. You gave them the considered version. People respect what they can't rush. When you refuse to be pressured into immediate response, you train others that you're someone who thinks before speaking, that you don't react to every provocation, that your words, when they come, are worth waiting for. Your deliberation becomes your authority. The discomfort is the point. Silence is uncomfortable. That's not a problem. That's the entire point. The discomfort is information. It's showing you where you're still dependent on others' approval, where you're still trying to manage their emotions, where you're still afraid of what they'll think if you don't immediately respond. Sit with that discomfort. Don't run from it. Every time you tolerate the discomfort of silence instead of rushing to fill it, you get stronger. You learn that you can survive other people being uncomfortable with you. You learn that you don't need to perform constant engagement to be valuable. You learn that your worth isn't determined by how quickly you respond to every demand for your energy. That's freedom. When silence isn't the answer. Silence isn't always strategic. Sometimes it's avoidance. You need to know the difference. Strategic silence. I need time to process this before I respond. Can we continue this conversation tomorrow? Avoidance. Ignoring the issue completely and hoping it goes away. Strategic silence. Pausing when you're flooded so you don't say something destructive. Avoidance. Using silence to punish someone or make them chase you. Strategic silence. Choosing not to engage with someone trying to provoke you. Avoidance. Refusing to have necessary conversations because they're uncomfortable. The difference is intent. Strategic silence serves you. It protects your peace. It creates space for wisdom. Avoidance serves fear. It prevents resolution. It makes problems worse. Be honest with yourself about which one you're doing. The bottom line: you don't have to fill every silence. You don't have to respond immediately to every demand. You don't have to manage everyone's discomfort with your constant words. Silence is not weakness, it's strength. It's the refusal to be controlled by pressure, the commitment to respond from clarity instead of reaction, the power to let discomfort exist without rushing to fix it. Practice silence daily. So when you need it most, it's available. Deploy it strategically. When words would make things worse, when you need time to think, when the other person needs space to process. Return to conversation stronger, calmer, clearer, more powerful. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing, and the most powerful thing you can do is wait until you have something worth saying. Chapter 6. Let go of what you can't control. You're exhausted because you're trying to control things that were never yours to control. Other people's opinions, past events, future outcomes, how someone else feels about what you said, whether they approve of your choices, what they think when you're not in the room. None of that is in your hands, yet you're spending enormous amounts of energy trying to manage it anyway, and it's destroying you. The control illusion. Your brain tells you that if you just think about it enough, worry about it enough, plan for it enough, you can control the outcome. This is a lie. Most of what you're trying to control is completely outside your influence. You can't control whether your partner wakes up in a good mood or a bad one. You can't control whether your boss appreciates the project you stayed up late finishing. You can't control whether your friend takes your advice or ignores it completely. You can't control whether the person you're interested in reciprocates your feelings. You can't control how your family reacts to your boundaries. You can't control the economy, the weather, traffic, or other people's choices. But you keep trying. Because the illusion of control feels safer than accepting reality. Here's the reality: you control far less than you think you do. And that's actually good news. What you can control your thoughts with practice. Not every thought that enters your mind, but which thoughts you feed, which ones you believe, which ones you let run your life. You can control your actions, always. Even when you feel like you can't, even when emotion is flooding your system, you still choose what you do next. You can control your responses. The whole point of this book, not what happens to you, how you respond to what happens to you. You can control your boundaries, non-negotiable, what you accept, what you tolerate, what you allow into your life, and what you refuse. That's the list. That's what's actually yours. Everything else, other people, outcomes, circumstances, is outside your control. And when you finally accept that, everything gets simpler. What you can't control other people's opinions, actions, or emotions. They're going to think what they think, do what they do, feel what they feel. You can influence sometimes, but you can't control. And trying to control them makes you manipulative, exhausting, and ultimately unsuccessful. You can't control past events. They happened. You can't undo them. You can't change them. You can only decide what you do with them now. Replaying what you should have said doesn't change what you did say. Obsessing over what you should have done doesn't change what you did. The past is fixed. Your response to it isn't. You can't control future outcomes. You can prepare. You can plan. You can do everything right, and it still might not work out the way you want, because outcomes depend on variables you can't see, predict, or manage. You can control your effort. You can't control results. You can't control most external circumstances. The traffic, the delay, the cancellation, the change of plans, the unexpected problem. Life is unpredictable. Resisting that unpredictability doesn't make you safer. It makes you anxious. Columbia University research. People who focus only on what they can control experience 58% less anxiety than people who try to control everything. 58%. That's the cost of the control illusion. The serenity to know the difference. You've heard the phrase, "Grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." That's not just a nice saying, it's a practice. Every time you feel stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, ask, "Can I influence this? If yes, what action can I take?" Then take it and release the outcome. If no, let it go. Redirect your energy to what you can influence. Most of your stress comes from trying to control things in the no category while neglecting things in the yes category. You're worrying about whether someone likes you instead of deciding whether you like yourself. You're obsessing over how your family will react to your decision instead of making the decision that's right for you. You're replaying a conversation from 3 days ago instead of preparing for the one you need to have tomorrow. Your energy is finite. Where you spend it determines your quality of life. Spend it on what you can actually influence. Release everything else. Release without resignation. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means redirecting energy from what you can't control to what you can. Resignation is, "Nothing I do matters, so why try?" Release is, "I can't control the outcome, but I can control my effort, so I'll give my best and let go of the rest." Resignation is passive and hopeless. Release is active and empowering. You're not powerless. You're powerful over the right things. You can't control whether you get the job. You can control how well you prepare for the interview. You can't control whether the relationship works out. You can control whether you show up with honesty and integrity. You can't control whether your business succeeds. You can control the quality of work you put into it. Do what's in your power. Release what's not. That's not giving up. That's wisdom. Focus your energy. Where attention goes, energy flows. If you're constantly focused on what you can't control, you're draining energy into a void. That email you sent hours ago, you can't control when they respond. Checking your inbox obsessively doesn't change that. That thing you said last week, you can't unsay it. Replaying it endlessly doesn't change what happened. that person's opinion of you, you can't control it. Trying to manage their perception exhausts you and changes nothing. Redirect that energy. Instead of worrying whether they'll text back, focus on what you need to do today. Instead of replaying what you said, focus on what you want to say next time. Instead of managing their opinion, focus on building your own integrity. You have limited energy. Spend it on what actually moves your life forward. The practice. For the next week, every time you feel anxious or stressed, write down what's bothering you. Then ask, is this in my control? If yes, what's one action I can take? Do it. Then release the outcome. If no, acknowledge it's not yours to control. Take a breath. Let it go. You'll notice how much energy you've been wasting on the no column and how much power you have when you focus on the yes column. The bottom line. You can't control most of what happens in your life. You can control how you respond to all of it. That's not a limitation, that's liberation. Because when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you free up enormous amounts of energy for what actually matters. Your thoughts, your actions, your responses, your boundaries. That's your domain. That's where your power lives. Everything else, not your circus, not your monkeys. Let it go. Focus on what you can influence. Release everything else. That's not giving up. That's growing up. And it's the difference between constant anxiety and sustainable peace. Chapter 7. Build unshakable emotional resilience. Resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. Every time you pause instead of react, you're building it. Every time you choose your response instead of defaulting to your pattern, you're strengthening it. Every time you stay grounded when everything feels chaotic, you're proving to yourself that you can. And that proof compounds. Resilience isn't innate. You look at women who seem unshakable and assume they've always been that way. They haven't. They've just practiced not reacting so many times that it's become their default. MIT research shows that emotional resilience compounds over time. Each successful non-reaction makes the next one 23% easier. 23%. That means the first time you pause instead of react, it's hard. The 10th time, it's easier. The 100th time, it's automatic. You're not trying to become someone else. You're training yourself into a more powerful version of who you already are. Your resilience. Foundation. Resilience has 3 layers: physical, mental, and emotional. Most women focus only on the emotional layer and wonder why they keep breaking. You can't build emotional resilience on a foundation of physical depletion. Physical resilience, sleep, real sleep. Not 5 hours in coffee, 7 to 9 hours where your nervous system actually recovers. Nutrition. Your brain needs fuel to regulate emotion. You can't run on empty and expect to stay calm. Movement. Your body stores stress. If you don't move it out, it builds until you explode. Mental resilience. Boundaries. You can't be resilient if you're constantly overextended. Selective attention. You choose what you focus on. Doom scrolling destroys resilience. Protect what goes into your mind. Strategic rest. Rest isn't laziness, it's maintenance. Your nervous system needs downtime to reset. Emotional resilience. Processing, not suppressing. Feel your emotions. Let them move through you. Don't stuff them down where they fester. Support systems. You're not meant to do this alone. Connection builds resilience. Isolation destroys it. All 3 layers matter. Neglect one and the others collapse. Process, don't suppress. There's a difference between pausing before you react and suppressing your emotions entirely. Pausing is strategic. It creates space between feeling and acting so you can respond wisely. Suppressing is harmful. It buries emotions that will eventually explode. You need to process what you feel, not immediately, not reactively, but eventually. Journal it. Talk to someone who won't just validate your reaction, but help you understand it. Move it through your body with exercise. Cry if you need to cry. Emotions aren't the enemy. Unprocessed emotions are. When you pause in the moment, you're not suppressing. You're delaying expression until you can do it constructively. Then you process, you feel it, you understand it, you release it. That's healthy emotional regulation, not suppression, not explosion, strategic processing. Learn from every reaction. You're going to react sometimes. You're human. The goal isn't perfection, it's improvement. When you do react in a way you regret, don't spiral into shame. Extract the lesson. Post-incident analysis. No judgment, just data. What triggered me? What did I do? What do I wish I'd done instead? What can I learn from this? This turns mistakes into mastery. Most women react, then beat themselves up for reacting, which creates more emotional dysregulation, which leads to more reactions. Break that cycle, react, observe, learn, adjust. Every reaction is information about where you still need to build resilience. Use it. Duke University research shows that people who analyze their reactions without self-judgment improve their emotional regulation 31% faster than those who don't. Learn from your patterns instead of hating yourself for them. Support systems matter. You can't build resilience in isolation. Connection is regulation. When you're dysregulated, being around someone who's calm helps your nervous system reset. But not everyone in your life serves this function. Some people make you calmer. Some make you more reactive. Pay attention to who's who. After spending time with certain people, do you feel more grounded or more chaotic? More confident or more anxious? More yourself or more performed? Surround yourself with the people who help you regulate, not the ones who destabilize you. And if the destabilizing people are unavoidable, family, coworkers, limit exposure, and protect your energy accordingly. You're not mean for doing this, you're wise. Your nervous system is affected by the nervous systems around you. Choose carefully who you let into your space. Celebrate wins. Every time you pause instead of react, that's a victory. Every time you choose strategic silence over emotional discharge, that's progress. Every time you let go of something you can't control instead of obsessing over it, that's growth. Acknowledge it. Your brain needs positive reinforcement to build new patterns. If you only notice when you fail, you're training yourself to expect failure. Notice when you succeed, even small wins. You didn't snap at your partner even though you were exhausted. Win. You paused for 3 seconds before responding to that email. Win. You let go of something that would have consumed you for days. Win. Celebrate these moments. They're proof that you're changing. Duke research shows that celebrating small wins increases the likelihood of sustained behavior change by 42%. Acknowledge your progress. It reinforces the new pattern. The compound effect. Resilience builds slowly, then all at once. At first, it feels like you're making no progress. You're still getting triggered, still reacting, still struggling. But you're practicing, and practice is accumulating even when you can't see it. Then one day, something that would have destroyed you a month ago barely registers. Someone criticizes you and you pause, you assess, you respond strategically, and you're fine. That's the compound effect of resilience. Every pause, every strategic silence, every moment you chose not to react, they all built toward this. You didn't become a different person. You became a more resilient version of yourself. The bottom line, resilience isn't innate, it's built. One non-reaction at a time, one strategic pause at a time, one moment of choosing wisdom over impulse at a time. Build your foundation, physical health, mental boundaries, emotional processing. Learn from every reaction instead of shaming yourself for it. Surround yourself with people who help you regulate, not people who destabilize you. Celebrate every win, every pause, every choice that aligns with who you're becoming instead of who you've been. The resilience you're building isn't about never feeling. It's about never being controlled by what you feel, and it's closer than you think. Chapter 8: The Woman Who Doesn't React. She's not emotionless. She's emotion-full without being emotion-controlled. She feels everything you feel: the anger, the hurt, the frustration, the fear, the disappointment. The difference is what she does with it. She doesn't suppress. She doesn't explode. She pauses, she processes, she responds. And in doing so, she's accessed a level of power that used to feel impossible. This is who you're becoming, who you become not cold, calm, not detached, deliberate, not unaffected, unshaken. You're becoming a woman who can feel everything without being destroyed by any of it. A woman who can sit in discomfort without immediately discharging it onto everyone around her. A woman who can hear criticism without becoming defensive. Who can feel anger without exploding. Who can experience hurt without weaponizing it. This doesn't make you weak, this makes you powerful. Because when you're not controlled by your reactions, you can't be manipulated by anyone who knows how to trigger you. And everyone has less power over you than they used to. What changes? Your relationships deepen. People stop walking on eggshells around you. They learn they can be honest without you falling apart. They can have hard conversations without you making it harder. Trust rebuilds. Because you're not the version of yourself who reacts first and apologizes later. You're the version who pauses, considers, and responds with intention. Your decisions improve. You're not making choices from panic, pressure, or people-pleasing. You're making them from clarity. You're not spending energy on damage control from emotional reactions. You're investing energy in what actually moves your life forward. Your energy increases. You're not exhausted from constant emotional whiplash. You're not draining yourself with reactions you regret. You have more capacity for what matters, for what you actually want, for the life you're building instead of the chaos you're managing. Your confidence grows, not because you never feel uncertain, because you trust yourself to handle whatever comes. You've proven to yourself over and over that you can pause when everything in you wants to react, that you can stay grounded when everything feels urgent, that you can let go of what you can't control. That proof builds unshakable confidence. The paradox: the less you react, the more you're heard. When you're not constantly emotional, people take your emotions seriously when you do express them. When you're not always urgent, people pay attention when you say something is important. When you're not demanding to be listened to, people lean in to hear what you have to say. Your calm becomes your authority. The more you pause, the faster you progress, because you're not spending time cleaning up messes from reactions. You're not rebuilding trust you damaged. You're not apologizing for words you can't take back. You're moving forward, consistently, strategically. The calmer you become, the more powerful you are. Not power over others, power over yourself. And that's the only power that actually matters. From practice to identity. Right now, you're learning not to react. You're practicing the pause. You're deploying your circuit breaker. You're asking the strategic question. You're doing the work. Soon, you'll be someone who pauses. It will be a skill you have, a tool you use, something you're good at. Eventually, you won't react. That's just who you are. Not because you're trying, because you've rewired your nervous system through consistent practice. Stanford neuroscience research shows it takes approximately 66 days of consistent practice to rewire an automatic response pattern. 66 days, 2 months of practicing the pause, of choosing strategic silence, of letting go of what you can't control, of building resilience through each non-reaction, and then it's not something you do, it's who you are. The ripple effect. Your calm influences everyone around you. When you stop reacting, you give others permission to do the same. When you pause in difficult conversations, you create space for others to think instead of escalate. When you stay grounded in chaos, you become the stable point others orient around. You become the woman people seek out when things get hard. Not because you fix everything, because you don't make things harder. Your presence becomes calming, your perspective becomes valuable, your wisdom becomes trusted. This happens naturally, not because you're performing calm, because you've built it. What you're not becoming. Not a doormat, your boundaries are stronger than ever. You're just enforcing them strategically instead of reactively. Not passive. You're more engaged than ever. You're just choosing when and how to engage instead of being pulled into everything. Not emotionless. You're feeling more deeply than before. You're just not being controlled by what you feel. The woman who doesn't react isn't less human. She's more free. Your new normal challenges don't shake you anymore. Not because they're smaller, because you've trained yourself to pause, assess, and respond strategically. Drama doesn't pull you in, not your circus, not your monkeys. You recognize it and choose not to engage. Chaos doesn't control you. You're the eye of the storm, calm, grounded, clear. This becomes your baseline, not something you have to work for every day, just who you are. The choice is yours every moment, every trigger, every opportunity to react. You have a choice. You now know what she knows. The pause changes everything. You know how to create it. You know when to deploy it. You know what it costs when you don't. The only question is, what will you do with that knowledge? You can go back to reacting. It's familiar. It's what you've always done. It's easier in the short term. Or you can choose the pause. Practice it, build it, become it. That choice determines everything. The final truth. You were never too emotional. You just hadn't learned to channel the power yet. Your emotions aren't the problem. They're information, energy, fuel. The problem was reacting to them automatically instead of responding to them strategically. But now you know better. You know how to pause, how to ground yourself, how to understand your patterns, how to stay calm when everything feels urgent, how to use silence as power, how to let go of what you can't control, how to build resilience that compounds. You know the 3 seconds between what happens and how you respond is where your entire life lives. And you know how to expand those 3 seconds into the space where you get to choose who you become, how you show up, what you create, the life you live instead of the chaos you manage. It's all in the pause. You're lying in bed. It's 2 a.m. But this time, you're not replaying a conversation you regret because you paused, you chose, you responded instead of reacted, and you're finally becoming the woman you've always known you could be. The woman who doesn't react, not because she doesn't feel, because she's learned to feel everything without being controlled by any of it. That woman is you. Now go live like it.